Martin Luther King Day is a day in which this country celebrates one of the most revered ideological figures of our modern history. Today, it is a commonly held that King was the messiah of the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, a man who brought an end to the misdeeds of a once racist nation and ultimately put an end to the tyranny of racism in America. Yet on this Martin Luther King Day, I grew to be far more questioning of that narrative. While I do not doubt the benefits and legitimacy of the movement, I craved a sense of nuance that seemed to be lacking. And so, as all normal teenagers do, I set to researching the civil rights movement. Not the movement itself, rather the variance in how people perceived the movement during given periods of time, and I was ultimately fascinated by what I found. Apparently, both the movement and King were deeply unpopular at the time, with King having a 66% disapproval rating, according to Gallup polling, which obviously quite contradicts the 90% approval rating he holds now. Furthermore, the poised idea that the movement single-handedly ended racism in America is simply untrue, seeing as systemic racism is still a massive nationwide problem. It is to say that these contradictions left me a little confused and perturbed. If King and his ideas are supported so substantially in this day and age, why do racist systems still pervade the United States? Or, more broadly, how might our knowledge or perception of the situation reflect or perpetuate existing power structures? To attempt to answer this, I want to take a step back and grasp what knowledge is and how it can be expressed in this scenario. Knowledge can come in many forms, and the way that those forms exist in our minds can have a drastic effect on how we utilize said knowledge. Knowledge that we hold may be considered empirical and founded wholly on fact, but how we perceive even empirical knowledge alters how that knowledge is utilized. Knowledge isn't inherently empirical. It can be shaped by an innumerable amount of factors. How much does one know of the situation? How was the knowledge expressed to the individual? What are the differing opinions on that knowledge? Holding knowledge is not simply to know something. Knowledge is the culmination of perception and analysis based on one's senses and other bits of knowledge that they have. To say, for instance, I know that the world is round seems empirical enough. Of course the world is round. How could it not be? Every scientist, every media figure, every person you've ever known has told you that the world is round. But how do we really know? Have you ever been to space and looked at the round Earth with your own two eyes? In a definite sense, you really don't know that the world is round, because you haven't ever seen it. And yet this example would still appear useless and reductive to most people. After all, it's common knowledge that the world is round. There is mountains of evidence supporting this idea. Yet I feel that this simple, useless conversation does in fact have a nugget of value in it. Most people will argue with a claim that the world is flat on instinct, because common knowledge inclines them to do so. In this situation, it is a lucky thing that the round Earth is in fact the known empirical truth. But what if common knowledge were utilized in such a way as to obfuscate the truth? I'm not here to pass judgment on what the truth is, as that can lead to an entire other philosophical discussion that will not be had here. Rather, I bring up this point to express how volatile knowledge is to many people. Because most people don't have the means or the desire to confirm every single piece of knowledge that they come across, ideas, especially broadly accepted ideas, can be accepted as truth without further thought from the one intaking the knowledge. Thus, as implied previously, I would go on to say that the spread of so-called common knowledge can lead to individuals reaching intellectual and analytical dead ends on certain ideas, simply tossing them aside as truth and nothing more. So then, how exactly does this apply itself to power structures? Well, if a power structure is normalized and propagandized as the correct and normal state of affairs, it can lead many to simply accept said structure and carry on with their lives. no matter the material or intellectual cost. This goes far beyond power structures as well, and can lead to individuals curtailing curiosity and analysis for the sake of brevity and simplicity. In this way, a people's knowledge may actually represent or yield a distinct lack of knowledge. For instance, let's imagine that there is a man who is driving to work. He has a 1-hour commute both to and from work, and every day he experiences the horrors of congested traffic, car accidents, and insatiable boredom. Despite his qualms, the man thinks little of his situation. The man knows that he hates it, yet he also knows that this is the same situation for countless people, and is simply a normal problem he must face in his life. This knowledge, this melancholy acceptance of what is common, brushes away the most fundamental question of all. Why is it like this? The man never asks this question. He will never know of who or how it was decided that mazes of highways be invested in, rather than public transportation. Will never come to understand the housing policies that led to his home being so far from the job market, and, most importantly, will never seek to fix or change the situation he finds himself in. If the situation is not expressly or immediately harmful, if the knowledge he holds of the situation is only how normal it is, the structure remains intact. I certainly don't mean to belie any bias in this hypothetical. Rather, I'm using it to exemplify ways in which knowledge perpetuates the norm. If people aren't exposed to potential of a new and different way of running things, then many will not seek that potential. Furthermore, and perhaps more importantly, those who know nothing of the problems of the power structure at hand will know only what they know: comfort. They don't know the issues that others face, and are often convinced that those problems don't exist outright. This ties back into the way in which many people perceive racism in the United States today. Many people do not or are not able to visibly see the effects that systemic racism has on people, and thus the extent of the knowledge they hold is that everything is peaceful and normal. Not only does this lack of understanding lead to a power structure's perpetuation, in that there is no resistance from the unknowing people, those same people can become actively counterproductive and angry at those who actually seek to fight the system. After all, if I am under the impression that most forms of racism had been abolished as a result of the civil rights movement, I would view those fighting against current systemic racism with confusion and contempt. The ideas of peace and prosperity have led to intellectual and physical complacency in many individuals. To put a pin in this discussion, I want to express the degree to which knowledge perpetuates power structures, because in many cases knowledge is the creator of power structures. Be it with race or gender or wealth inequality or government, these systems were created solely by humans. There is no definitive natural order that a janitor makes less than a doctor, because we were the ones who created janitors and doctors. Systems of power in society are very often simply creations that people used for whatever reason, and thus the knowledge of said power structure is the power structure. After all, if humanity had never created or known race as a concept, would racism exist in the world? Furthermore, because these systems are our creations, only we have the ability to alter those systems, and to seek to know a world different from our own. If we are to know beyond our basic knowledge that power is inevitable, then perhaps we can put an end to power's perpetuation.